They were at the Mishna Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. This year will be Lezecher Nishmas, Bela Bas Yehuda, no Bas Yisrael, Bella Lapushina. That's Jeff Zaretsky's mother-in-law, whose funeral was today. So the Mishnah says, "What if a ksuva was not written? Lo kasav l'ksuva. If he didn't write a ksuva, which is not good." Because the Gemara, the Maseches Kala says that a wife without a ksuva is they're not allowed to stay married if she doesn't have a ksuva. He has to write her ksuva immediately. It's like an insurance policy for her. So we did see a Ran all the way at the beginning. What did the Ran say? The Ran seemed to say that it was possible that they got married right away or right before Shabbos, before Ketuvah was written. And I think he would give her metaltalin in place. The Ran is all the way on Aleph Amud Aleph. I don't remember exactly what the Ran said. Yeah, I don't see it right here right now. I'll have to find it. But if he didn't write a ksuva, Basula Gova Masayim, if she was a Basula at the time of the marriage, she collects 200 zuz, V'amana mana, and a widow will collect 100 zuz. Mipnei Shahu Tanai Basin. Because these amounts are a condition of the Basin. So even if you didn't write it, Basin obligates you to pay it anyway. So you could look at it two ways, that even if you didn't formally accept yourself, you have to accept yourself because Basin wouldn't let it happen without you accepting yourself. Also, Basin, it does have the power of Hefker Basin Hefker to make someone's money ownerless. So you could say that they made 200 zuz of his ownerless and give it to the wife, but it's I don't think it works from Hefker Basin Hefker. I think it's the Tanai Basin means that even if he doesn't formally accept himself, everyone knows that this is what Basin requires, so it's as if he accepted it. Even independent of the rule of Kol Makadesh, Adaita D'Rabbanan Kamikadesh. It's probably a separate rule than that also. What if he didn't write in the ksuva 100 zuz, but he wrote a certain field which was worth 100 zuz? Excuse me, I skipped a word. If he wrote in it that I'll give you this piece of real estate which was worth 100 zuz instead of writing 200 zuz. So does that work? And he didn't write that all of my property is pledged, is mortgage, or is a security for your ksuva chayev. He has to pay the full 200 zuz. He has all of his property would be mortgaged towards paying the ksuva shahud tanai basin, because it's a condition of basin. So they don't let you get married unless you agree to that. So it's not just if he didn't write a ksuva, he has to pay 200, but if he wrote in the ksuva the field for 100, that doesn't work either. It's as if he wrote all 200. Lo kasav la im tishtabai apukrinach vosvinach lilintu. If he didn't write, if you would become a hostage, I will redeem you, and I will return you to me as a wife. So unfortunately, the Gemaras we're going to learn today are very unfortunately and unusually halacha l'maisa because of what happened in Gaza. But we did learn a few weeks ago already that part of the ksuva is that the husband is obligated to redeem his wife. And in this case, they're not interested in money. It's not like someone could say, "Here's $100,000. I'll ransom my wife." They don't even want money. Uva kohenes, and if it's the wife of a kohen, that even if she'd be raped, she's not allowed to stay married to him. Adrinach lemidonasech, I'll return you to your city because he can't stay married to her. So he says, I will redeem you and I will return you to your city because she can't remain his wife. Chayev, he is obligated to do these things, even though he didn't write it in the ksuva, shahud tanai basin, because it's a condition of basin. Nishbe is chayev liftosa. If she was held hostage or captive or kidnapped, he's obligated to redeem her. Bimama hare gita ksuvasa v'siftes atzmi. What if he said as atzma? What if he gave her a get and a ksuva and says redeem yourself? Ein or shay, he's not allowed to. The Rashi says because even though he's trying to divorce her right now, and if she's not his wife, he doesn't have to redeem her. But before he redeemed her, she was already a hostage, or she was already kidnapped, so she wouldn't be. He already had an obligation to redeem her. So, in this case, to give a get, he actually has to give it to her. So how could he give it to her if she's a hostage? So we know from certain Gemaras, let's say when Rabbi Kiva was imprisoned by the Romans before they killed him, his Talmidim had a shaila, or they had a question, so they yelled it or they said it outside where he was being held, and he answered them. And then there was a different story with Rabbi Kiva that they let his Talmidim bring him food. And one day the Romans said, you brought him way too much water. You're trying to soften the dirt so you could dig out. They poured out half the water. Now, the reason he needed that much water was because he did Netilas Yadayim. So he needed water for Netilas Yadayim and water to drink. So that day he didn't drink because he only used it for Netilas Yadayim. So it could be in those days. And again, that was government capture, wasn't kidnapped. But it is possible that some of the people who are held hostage, it's possible. I don't know for sure. There's not too many history books about this. That maybe you were able to have contact with them, but they were hostage and weren't able to do much. So it must be a case where he was able to give her the get, but he wasn't able to take her back. They were still hostage. She was still kidnapped or hostage, whatever term we want to use. Laksa, if she got sick, chayav l'raposa, he has to heal her, which means get her better. Rashi says because the reason is refuah is like food. That taking her to the doctor is like food, which actually comes into tangentially, not directly, but in regard to taking vitamins or medicines. There's a halacha you're not allowed to take gzeira d'rabbanan. You're not allowed to take medicines on Shabbos because in those days medicines were made by grinding stuff up, mortar and pestle or whatever. So if you would take medicines, we're worried you might grind up more on Shabbos, and the grinding itself is one of the av malachos. So you can't. So there's a d'rabbanan not to take medicine because you might take more. So nowadays, if a doctor prescribes something, you're allowed to take it. I did see opinion. Well, there might be some opinions that you can't, but we can certainly take it. I did see someone bring down once. I remember who I saw it from, but I don't know who he quoted it from. That you wouldn't be allowed to take the first dose on Shabbos, but once you started your antibiotic or whatever before Shabbos, you could continue taking it on Shabbos. But some of this stuff is because you're already sick. Because you're already sick, you could take it. But if it's something that you're taking, what's the word? Depending on what the problem is, if it's something that you're only taking to prevent something from happening, you might not be allowed to take that on Shabbos. Because if you feel bad enough that you'd have to lay down, you're at least have a status of a chola she'ein bo sakana. But if usually in the afternoon you get a headache, you want to take an Advil beforehand so you don't get the headache. Well, because you're not sick now, you wouldn't be allowed to take it, because in that case you don't have any din of chola at all. So if there's a specific thing, depending on what it is, let's say, depending on what it is, you might need to take it. The rabbi would need to consult with the doctor to know what it is. But it is possible that some medicines maybe shouldn't be taken on Shabbos. And then what about vitamins? So some say vitamins aren't needed. You're not sick. You can't take vitamins at all on Shabbos. That's what some say. Others say that vitamins are for nutrition and food is nutrition. So vitamins are just a form of eating. So because that's the way we get these nutrients, that's a regular way to take the vitamin. You'd be allowed to take a vitamin on Shabbos also. I don't think I saw this anywhere, but it seems that machlokas, though, about taking vitamins would affect the following shaila. Could you take a vitamin on Pesach if it's not kosher for Pesach? So if you hold that you're allowed to take a vitamin on Shabbos because you're considering it food, then it's food. So for Pesach, it has to be kosher for Pesach in order for you to take it. If you hold that a vitamin is not like food, and you would not be allowed to take a medicine on Shabbos, swallowing a pill is something that's not the derech achila. It's not the way that you eat something, because normally eating is you chew it, you taste it, you swallow it. But there's halachas of bala matzah. If you just swallowed matzah somehow without chewing it, and you didn't taste it, are you yotze, this and that? So it seems that there's grounds to say, according to the opinions, that you wouldn't be allowed to take medicine on vitamins on Shabbos. It wouldn't need a hechsher for Pesach because you're not eating it. You're swallowing it without tasting it. That happens. To me, that seems to be that those questions would depend on each other. But I didn't see anyone who actually said that. Yeah.
I'm not asking a shaila. I mean, I take one vitamin. It's prescribed.
Okay.
And I thought I asked somebody before, but I'm not gonna ask. I
Okay.
take it on Pesach, I take it on Shabbos, and but it is prescribed, it's been prescribed by the doctor. I don't take multivitamins or anything like that for food, this is because my levels were low originally, and so well, it's actually funny. Wait, I don't take it on Shabbos.
Okay.
I don't. That's the one day a week I don't, because on Fridays I arrange my schedule on Fridays, so I take the huge version of it.
Okay.
But
so it's like the mun. You get the double portion on Erev Shabbos, so you don't need it on Shabbos.
Yeah.
Amar Hare Gita Uksuvasa Terapes Atzma Rashai. But if he says, here, I'm divorcing you, and here's your ksuva money, and you'll get yourself better, I'm not going to pay for your doctor bills, he's allowed to do that. Rashi says, because you're not, Rashi says, She'ein Adam Chayav Lazon Grusha, so you're not obligated to feed your ex-wife that you divorced. Obviously, you're not married and you gave her ksuva, so she should have money to be able to support herself with that. But to pay for her doctor bills, you're able to divorce her, not pay for doctor bills, as opposed to redeeming her from captivity, which you're not allowed to get out of by trying to divorce her. So the Gemara says, the first wide line on Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, and it's 51a2 towards the bottom there, where it says Gemara, money, who is our Mishna like, that even at the beginning, that if you didn't write a ksuva, she gets the 200 if she's a psula, she gets 100 if she's an almana. Rabbi Meir, this is Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Amar kol hapochus b'sul mimasem l'mana mimana hareza be'ilas nus. Whoever would give or write in the ksuva for a besula less than 200 zuz, and for an almana, a widow, less than 100 zuz, it is a be'ilas nus. It is it's an unsanctified union, to put it one way. How do they translate it? It is a promiscuous cohabitation. Di Rabbi Yehuda, because if it was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, ha'amar ratza kosi lebesula shtar shalmasayim. So if you're in the article, turn to the next page, because Rabbi Yehuda says that if you would write for a basula a shtar for 200 zuz, koseves hiskabaltim chamana, and she writes a receipt that she already received 100 mana, ulamana mana v'hikoseves hiskabaltim chamishim zuz. And if for Amana, if you wrote 100 zuz and she gives him a receipt that she already received 50, they're allowed to stay married. So even though the Takanas Chachamim was a husband had to pay 200 zuz for his wife if he married her as a basula in case he divorces her, and it's a security blanket to so basically what Rabbi Yehuda was saying is that she's writing 200, but she's giving him a discount. She's writing a receipt to him that she received it, even if she didn't really receive it, so that when she gets divorced, he doesn't have to pay that full amount. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, that is you fulfill the ksuva by doing that. But Rabbi Meir holds that it's not. He has to owe her 200 zuz upon the termination of the marriage, or if he dies. So the beginning of our Mishnah has to be Rabbi Meir's opinion that even if you didn't write 200, he's still obligated in full 200. Ema Seifa, however, look at the next later part of the Mishnah. Kasabla Sada Shava Manatachim Saim Zuz Lo Kasabla Kanachasim de Isli Achrain Liksubasech Chayav Shu Tanai based in. But when if he write in the ksuva that he's giving her a field worth 100 zuz, instead of writing I'll give you money worth 100 zuz, or if he didn't write that all my property is mortgaged, is a security to pay your ksuva, he's chayiv to pay this even if he didn't write it. Shehu Tanai Beis Asan Rabbi Yehuda. That follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Achrayus to Soferhu, because he holds that so Rashi explains that what if a shtar was written that someone owes someone money and it didn't mention anything about land being a security for in case he can't pay. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is if the shtar is missing that, it's assumed that that there was a security of land in the shtar, and the sofer who wrote up the shtar, he forgot to put it in. So therefore, even if the security or this statement that this field is a security or there's a lien against this field in case I can't afford to pay it or whatever, it's assumed it's there. So that part of the Mishnah has to be Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Meir, because if it would follow Rabbi Meir's opinion is Amar Achreus Lav Tosofer here. He says if a contract is missing a clause of a lien, that this land is pledged as a security for this obligation, it's not a mistake of the sofer, and we assume that it's more than assume. We hold that the person who wrote the shtar is not including this lien or this guarantee or security in the document. Ditnan, because we learned in the Mishnah in Bab Mitzi in the first parak, Matasi Shitrei Chov. Matza Shitrei Chov. If someone found loan documents or contracts where someone owes someone money. As we turn to Nun Aleph Amud Beis, yesh b'hem achrayas nechasim lo yachzer. If in it, the shtar, it's written that a field is indebted for this loan, he shouldn't return it. Meaning, this is a case of Hashavas Aveda. So he found a shtar. So the question is, how does shtaros work? Let's say Ruvain borrowed money from Shema. So Ruvain, the borrower, would write up a shtar, or in case of Gemara, maybe pay a sofer to write the shtar, and then he'd give the shtar to Shimon. Shimon holds the shtar. So because he's hold the star, he can present it and show that that's evidence that Ruvain borrowed the money from him. So so then when Ruvain would pay back the loan, Shimon would give the star back to Ruvain. But what would be the most prudent action for Ruvain to do? To rip it up. But the question is, we found a star. So should we assume that the person who is owed the money lost it, and if we give it back to him, he'll be able to use the star to collect whatever debt or whatever loan is in the document? Or do we assume that it was paid back and it was the person who was indebted, and really he already paid it back and he's the one who lost it? So who should we assume lost the star? And there's a big nafkamina, because if we give it to the wrong person, if we gave it to Ruvain, then Shimon's never going to get his loan paid off. If Ruvain already paid it off, if Ruvain and Ruvain lost it and we give it back to Shimon, Ruvain's going to have to pay twice for the same loan. So what are we supposed to do in a case like that? That's what the Mishna is talking about. So if the star has written in it that property is a security for the payment of this lo yachzer, you do not return this document to the person who made the loan, who's waiting to get the money back, shebesin ifraimehem, because if this person would have that document, Beis Din would collect from these fields, even if the fields were sold in the meantime. They would take away from someone, even if the fields were sold. Beis Din would collect to make the loan good. If the star that was found, if the contract that was found does not have any property that was secured for the loan in it, Yachzer, you could return it to the person who made the loan, even though he might double collect. That's the chashash. Are we worried that he's going to be double collecting this? She'ain Beis Din Efrain Mehen, because Beis Din is not going to take away any property to get this paid. Divrei Rabbi Meir. This is the words of Rabbi Meir. So according to Rabbi Meir, if it mentions a security of a real estate in the document, then this loan is secured by real estate. If it's not written, it's not secured. The Chachamim Omrim, and the Chachamim, but the Chachamim in this case is Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi said, even though it says Chachamim, Rashi points out that the Bar Plukta, the person who always argued on Rabbi Meir, is Rabbi Yehuda, because they lived in the same generation. But Rashi just says because they were in the same generation. But many, many times, a Mishna, the first Mishna I learned was so the first Mishnah I learned, in school, was Sukkah, which is the Tanakama, and then Rabbi Yehuda argues on the Tanakama. And my Rebbe said that the first opinion was Rabbi Meir, because the Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. And then the Machlokas, that Mishnah later also had a Machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel in it. But there's very common to see a Machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. So here, when it said Chachamim in that Mishnah, it means Rabbi Yehuda. They were contemporaries. Rabbi Yehuda says you're never allowed to return it to the person who made the loan, because this person might use it to pay back. Because either way, Beis Din will take from the properties owned by the borrower in this document, because that Rabbi Yehuda holds, the Gemara explains later, or the Gemara Bava Metzia there explains, because Rabbi Yehuda holds that the default is that there is always a security of real estate in this loan, and if the contract doesn't have it, it was omitted accidentally by the sofer. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, how do you make a loan that wouldn't be a security secured by a loan? You must have to put in this thing. This is an unsecured loan. It's not secured by any real estate. I guess you'd have to put that clause explicitly in to make it not secured by real estate. But I'd have to learn that Gemara to be sure about that. So now the Gemara says, Reisha Rabbi Meir v'Sefer Rabbi Yehuda. Does it make sense that the first din of our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir and the second din is Rabbi Yehuda? It doesn't make sense. A Mishnah should be authored by one person. If it's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, wouldn't have made something that's by different opinions who are arguing on each other in the same Mishnah, making it sound like it's the same person who has both opinions. And if you want to hold that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, even the clause about if you wrote the if you wrote a field for 100, it's as if it's you still owe the 200. If you want to say that that's Rabbi Meir, Vashani leila Rabbi Meir being suva l'shtare, and you might want to say that Rabbi Meir holds the halacha of a regular shtar is different than halacha ksuva, because you could say, well, maybe in general Rabbi Meir holds if it's written in there, it's part of the contract, and if the security of the field is not written in there, it's not part of the contract. But a ksuva, marriage contract, is different. Ksuva is always, even if it's not written in there, it is always in there. You can't say that. Umi shanile, does he make such a distinction? But Tanya, we learned in a braysa, chamisha gova minam churarim. There's 5 situations where someone can collect from a field that the person who made the who borrowed the money owns fields. And the loans can be collected from the fields that he owns. But, and we've mentioned this in the past few weeks several times, there is a concept in halacha that if certain loans or certain fields were security for certain loans, even if Ruvain sold the fields, the creditor is allowed to take it from Levi, who had bought the field, and Ruvain is going to have to make Levi whole for the amount. So, but because the field itself was secured, it doesn't matter. Even if the field was sold, that field is still mortgaged or secure for the original loan, and Reuven is going to have to take care of Levi for not having the field anymore. But these cases, Churarim it's only the fields that are owned by the person, and the security is not going to go. If the field got sold to someone else, these creditors are not allowed to collect from the field if it got sold. So only mechurarim. What are these 5 cases? Peros u'shvach peros. So peros. This is what we were. So the field that the crops that the field produces, or the improvement of the crop that it that the field produced. So that's talking about a case in Gittin that if someone had stolen a field somehow and then sold the field to someone else, and the new person made improvements on the field. They put a wall around it, they planted more trees, whatever, so it produces more. And then they figured out that it was stolen and the original owner was repossessing it. So any improvements that the new owner, who didn't know it was stolen, made, so he can collect money from the original owner of the field, who is now repossessing it, but he's only allowed to take it from free and clear fields of that person. He's not. Let's say Ruvain, who owned these fields, had sold some other fields to Binyamin. So this Levi, who had owned it, who had bought this stolen field, not knowing it was stolen, and made improvements, he could collect only from a different field that Ruvain owns, but he can't collect from a field that Ruvain sold to Binyamin. And someone who accepted upon himself to feed his stepson or stepdaughter, his wife's son or his wife's daughter. So we only collect, so if he had sold fields and that's what he has, we don't take it from that third party in order to feed his stepchildren, that even though he accepted to feed them he accepted upon himself to feed them. They get chov she'ein bo achrayos, or a contract of debt that does not have achrayos written into it. So that's a case like this, that it doesn't say that a field is secured for it. So you can't go after a field that was sold if it didn't say in the contract for that there was such a security. Uksubas isha she'ein bo achrayos, or a ksuva of a woman that doesn't have this guarantee or this pledge, this lien in it. And in our Mishnah said that even if the ksuvas isha didn't have this lien in it, you could collect. And man shamasle damar chrayas lav toso for her. And who's the opinion who holds that if there's an omission of this pledge of property to pay off the debt is not we don't assume that it's a mistake of the sofer, Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Huda is the one who would hold that if the absence of it doesn't mean anything because it's a clause, because we just hold that the sofer forgot to write it. So this brisa of 5 people who collect from fields that are only in the hands of the owner, not that they were sold to a third party, Rabbi Meir, uketanik suvas isha, and in this list of 5 people, one of the things is a ksuva. So the same way that Rabbi Meir holds from a regular shtar chov, a regular loan document, that if there's no lien to a property written in it, there's no lien. And so from here we see the ksuvas isha. Also, if the ksuvas isha didn't have a lien in it, you're not allowed to collect. So it shows that Rabbi Meir holds the same halacha for a regular loan document is the same halacha for a ksuva. So even though you could have made a distinction, the Rabbi Meir made a distinction. This anonymous brisa, which is Stam Mishna, is Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir holds that from this we see that Rabbi Meir holds that the ksuva has the same din as a regular shtar. So how can we explain that the first din in our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir and the second one seems to be Rabbi Huda? So Ibay Sema Rabbi Meir, Ibay Sema Rabbi Huda. We could explain both clauses that are authored by Rabbi Meir, or we could explain that both clauses could be according to Rabbi Huda. Ibay Sema Rabbi Yehuda. We could say that both clauses are Rabbi Huda. So the second clause is Rabbi Yehuda. That's fine. The question is, so how could the first clause fit with Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda holds that that he could write it in the ksuva that he owes her 200, but then she can give him a receipt that she already received 100, so that if he would die or whatever, she would only get 100 zuz because she gave him a receipt that it was partially paid. So how does that fit with Rabbi Yehuda? Hasam kasvola hiskabalti, because the Mishnah was when she wrote him a receipt that she received part of the payment. Therefore, he doesn't have to pay the 200 zuz; he only pays the 100. But here she didn't write him a receipt that she received part of the ksuva. So when she didn't have any documentation showing that she had received part of her ksuva already, he has to pay the full amount, even if the ksuva itself doesn't say 200. By Sema Rabbi Meir, we turn to 51b if you're in the ArtScroll side. By Sema Rabbi Meir, we could say that the whole thing's Rabbi Meir. So the first clause, Rabbi Meir, is fine. No, but what about the second clause? My chayav diktani minam churarin. So when our Mishnah says that if he didn't write that his fields were security or lien, there was a lien against his fields to pay her ksuva, how come it says he pays from the field? So we answer, it's not paying from all fields. It's only paying from the fields that haven't been sold to someone else, and so it fits exactly with that brisa that we quoted, because this Mishnah doesn't mean it can be collected from any field. It only means the mechurarim which are have not been sold. Okay, 2 dots. Lo kasavla. If he didn't write, if you were taken captive, I will redeem you and return you as my wife, he has to do it anyway because it's Tanai based in. So this sugya we've alluded to at least twice already earlier in Kesuvos, but this is the main Kesuva. Amar Avua de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel said, Eishes Yisrael Shenensa, if the wife of a Yisrael, not a Kohen, but of a Yisrael, was raped, Asura Labaila, she is forbidden to stay with her husband. We're worried that even though at the beginning it was rape, but by the end of it, she was okay with it. Esave Rav Lavor de Shmuel. Rav asked to Avor de Shmuel, Im Tishtabaya Parkinach Vachsuina Lila Intu. Our Mishnah here says, if you're taken captive, I promise to redeem you and return to you to be my wife. According to you, though, Avor de Shmuel, she wouldn't be allowed to remain married to him. So how could the Mishnah say this? So Ishtik, he had no answer. He was quiet. Kari Rav Ale the Avor de Shmuel, Sarim Atzru B'milim, V'kafi Simulapian. So Rav said about Avor de Shmuel, a pasuk from Eov, princes stopped their words and they put a hand in their mouth. So because he said that, he stopped his words and he covered up his mouth with his mouth, it means that Avor de Shmuel could have given an answer, but he restrained himself from answering. So what possible answer? It seems a pretty strong question that Rav asked from our Mishnah. That even if she was raped, so in the case of when she's held captive, we're worried that she's going to be raped by her captors. So if she was, because the Kesuva, you're right, I'm going to redeem you and you'll remain being my wife. That shows that if she would have been raped, she could remain married. It's not like what Avor de Shmuel says. So, my Isla Meimer, what could have Avor de Shmuel answered? But he kept quiet. Bishvuya hikilu. He could have said that they were lenient in the case of a shvuya, because in the case of a shvuya, a captive or a kidnapped, we don't know that she was raped. But in a case where we know that she was raped, that they couldn't remain married. Ulavur de Shmuel onus de shayir achmana hech mishkachas la. But according to Avur de Shmuel, where will you ever have a case where the Torah permitted a case of rape that she could stay with her husband? According to Avur de Shmuel, what's such a situation? So if Adam testified that she was screaming from the entire time to the beginning to the end, so the fact that she's screaming all the way till the end shows that she was not happy with it at the end either. So therefore, the beginning was against her consent and the end was also against her consent. Upliga de Rava, and Avur de Shmuel's father's halacha argues on Rava. The Amar Rava says, Kol shetchilasa ba'onos v'sof baratzon. Even if or wherever there's a case that the beginning was against her will, but the end was not against her will. I mean, baratzon means it was willing. So it's when I say the end was not against her will, it's not completely accurate. Afilu hi omeres hanichu lo, even if she says, leave him alone. Shalmale niskak la hisocharto, even if she would say, so this is a little bit of a crazy thought for us to think. She's saying that I would pay him to do it again, obviously with consent this time. So that's a case where it's showing that she was consenting by the end. Muteris, she's still allowed to go back to her husband. My time. What's the reason? Yetzer al Bisha, because once the act was started out against her will, the Yetzer Hara or whatever, that made her be okay with it later. But if not for the Yetzer Hara letting her be okay with it, she would have been against it from the beginning to the end. And we know that she was against it at the beginning. Tana Kavase de Rava. There's a brisa like Rava, but he lo nispasa. So the halacha is, and this we learned about this when we learned about the Nara Marasa, but we learned about the seduced and the Nara Marasa. So the Nara Marasa is when she was taken against her will, because it was against her will, she could stay with her husband. The Hilo Nispasa, she was in a case where, so this pasuk is actually by a sota, she was not grabbed or forced. So Asura. the reason that she becomes forbidden to her husband is because she wasn't forced. Hanispasa muteres. But if she would have been forced, and there would have been an extramarital relationship because of being forced, she would still remain permitted to her husband. But you have another case, nispasa muteres, that even though she wasn't taken against her will, she remains permitted to her husband. And what's this? A case even when the beginning of it was against her will, but by the end it wasn't against her will anymore, she remains permitted to her husband. So this brisa is like the opinion of Rava. Hani idach, there's another brisa about the same words but a different drasha. V'hilo nispasa. When is she forbidden? When she was not forced. Asura. Then she's forbidden to stay with her, to remain married to her husband. Hanisbasa muteres. But if she would have been taken against her will, she would be permitted to her husband. V'yesh lacheres. And we have another case. Sha'afapi shanispasa asura. There's another case that when she is taken against her will, she is forbidden to her husband. Ve'ezozo. And what is this case? Eishes kohen, the wife of a kohen. Because a kohen is not allowed to marry a divorced woman. He can marry a widow, but not a divorced woman. So if she would be raped, even though it's not the same as being divorced, but she would have the status of what halacha. So besides for the halacha of grusha, the pasuk says in Parshas Zemar, Isha zonava chalala lo yikachu v'isha grusha meisha lo yikachu, that a kohen is not allowed to marry a zona and is not allowed to marry a woman who is divorced from her husband. So the Rambam says in Hilchos Yisrael that when it says zona, the word zona in modern Hebrew means prostitute, but in this context it means she has a status of a zona, and a zona doesn't mean prostitute. But the Rambam says Mipias Shmuel Lamdu, from Torah Shabbat Peh we know Shazona Hamura B'Torah, that the zona who is discussed in the Torah, he shenivalas leisha le kol she'ena bas Yisrael, either someone who's not Jewish. Oh, bas Yisrael. So that's why a kohen can't marry a convert. Oh, bas Yisrael shenivala ladam she'asur linasi lo iser shava b'kol. Or she was born a Jew, but she had a sexual relationship with the person that she's not allowed to marry him, a type of issue that would be forbidden to anyone. Oh, shenivala l'chalal afabi shemateres naselo, or she married a chalal. So a chalal would be, let's say, a kohen married a divorced woman and had a kid. The kid isn't a kohen; the kid is a status of a chalal. So the halacha is that a chalal, if he would get married to someone, he would make his wife a halala, and their kids would be halalim. They wouldn't be kohanim anyway. He's no longer a kohen, but his kids would also be a halal. And that means that, so let's say he died, so his wife is a widow. A kohen is allowed to marry a widow, but that's a regular widow because she was married to this man who has the status of a halal. She has the status of this halachic status of zona, so she wouldn't be allowed to marry a kohen even if she would be widowed, because she has the status of zona because she was married to a halal. So if someone was, if a woman had sexual relations with an animal, even though there's a death penalty for it, she doesn't become a zona and she doesn't become forbidden to marry a kohen. Shilo nivlo la'adam, because this sexual relationship was not with a person, was not with a man. So in halacha beis, v'lo v'chein habala pnuya afilu ha'isa kadesha shapira atzma l'kal. And similarly, if someone had a sexual relationship with an unmarried woman, even if she was a harlot that was available to anyone, afapi shehi b'malchus, even though it's forbidden to have this relationship with the lashes, it's not a death penalty, but it's a lashes, lo nasa zona. She doesn't have the halachic status of zona. In modern Hebrew, we would call her a zona, but when the Torah talks about zona, such a woman like that, it's called a kedesha. Which, well, in this week's parsha in Vayishlach, Shimon and Levi said that Shechem was treating Dinah like a zona, hachazona yasas avosenu. But in Parshas Vayigash, Vayeshev, in a few weeks, Vayeshev's next week, Yehuda with Tamar, he called her a kedesha when he didn't know that it was her with her face was covered. So he said Ayeh HaKedesha. So the Rambam says that the word kedesha is what we would call a prostitute in modern Hebrew. But in modern Hebrew, zona is that, but the halachic term of zona is not the same as the modern Hebrew term of zona. That's what I'm reading read this Rambam to make that so we understand that. So because if a lady was married to a Kohen, she's an Ashes Ish. So anyone would be forbidden to marry her or to have any sexual relationship with her because it would be adultery. So even if she was raped, it's not an act of adultery, but it gives her the status of a zona. And therefore she's not allowed to stay married to her husband. That is why if the wife of a Kohen was raped, they can't stay married. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel said the name of Rabbi Shmuel, a different drush on this pasuk. V'hilo nispasa. So by the case of Sota, she's forbidden to her husband because she was not coerced into this relationship. She's asura hanisbis hamuteres, but if she would have been taken against her will, she would remain permitted to her husband. V'yeshla acheres shafa pishaloni spas muteres. There's another case that even if she wasn't taken against her will, she remains permitted to her husband. Ve'ezozu, and what is this case? Shekidusheha kidushay taos, that her kiddushin were mistaken. Shafilu bina morkavak seifa mema'enas va'alachas la. That even if we see that she's holding on to her child, she can refuse and walk away. So what is this talking about? Rashi says in the first white line in Rashi that this was a case where there was a kiddushin on a condition, and then but the condition was not met. But meanwhile, when the condition could have been met, she had an affair with someone else. She can still marry the original guy. Since the condition was never fulfilled, she wasn't considered married when she had this affair, so it wasn't adultery. I don't know what kind of guy would want to stay married to her, or to marry her a second time without conditions, but that's the case. That's what the Gemara says. Amar Rav Yehuda Hani Neshei Deganvu Ganve. Rabbi Yehuda says these women that were taken by robbers, Shari and Leguvrayu, they're permitted to be with their husbands after they get freed. So Rashi says because if these bandits or robbers were with them, it was against the will of the woman. Amarle Rabban Rav Yehuda, the Rabbanan said to Rav Yehuda, but we see that they bring them bread. So the fact that she brings them bread shows that if she would hate him that much, they wouldn't bring him bread. So that makes it look like she's not completely opposed to this. So the Gemara answers, Machmas Yira. She doesn't do it because she likes the guy. She does it because she's afraid either that she's going to get killed or get abused again. So that's why she gives him food. But it's not showing that she consented to anything. But we also see that the women are giving arrows over to these bandits so they can shoot other people. So the Gemara again says, Machmas Yira. Again, they're doing that out of fear that they're going to get hurt more or kill if they don't do it. But it's not that they that they're doing it because she supports them and likes the guy. So Vadai Shavkinan Va'azu min Afshayu Asiran. So if the women would be freed, but then the woman by her own volition goes back to these bandits who had kidnapped then Asiran, then we would say that she's not permitted to her husband, because in those cases she clearly likes the guy and must have willingly is giving herself to that guy. So it's not considered a case of against her will anymore. We learned in the Brisa, shvuya malchus harein kishvuyim. The captives of the government or of the king, I mean, really malchus means the king, are like captives. So, which means we're not worried that if we don't know that they were raped, and if and even if they were, it would have been raped against their consent, so they remain permitted to their husbands as long as their husband is not a kohen. But if they were held by armed bandits type people, then they're not like shvuyim, and we say that they are forbidden to their husbands. But we learned in a different brisa that we just saw that if they were taken by these bandits, they were permitted to their husbands. How come this brisa says that they're not permitted to their husbands? So the Gemara says malchus hamachus lo kasha, haba malchus achashverosh, haba malchus ben netzer. So there seems to be a brisa in reverse about both cases. That the brisa says that if the king takes you as captive, you're forbidden to return to your husband. But if you're taken by the bandits, you are permitted. She's permitted to go back to her husband. So malchus lo kasha. It's not a contradiction about being prisoner of the king to not. Haba malchus achashverosh, haba malchus ben netzer. This is the case of Achashverosh, where if Achashverosh, when he was taking all the beautiful women, he was not planning on marrying them all. He was only planning on looking for one. But so even though he was cohabiting with them once before, and it wasn't going to disqualify them from staying married to their husbands. But Haba Malchus Ben Netzer. Ben Netzer was some type of bandit or guerrilla leader, I think would be a better modern term for him. And even though he was a bandit, but he would conquer land, and then he would be the king of that territory, of that land. So when it was Ben Netzer, then she would not be allowed to stay with her husband. Lysios Lokasha. It's not a contradiction between if taken by bandits, she's forbidden to her husband or not forbidden to her husband. Haba Ben Netzer. If it's like a Ben Netzer, she's forbidden to her husband because Ben Netzer would potentially marry her also. Haba listim to Alma, but a regular listim, we're not worried that she would consent, and so we don't assume that she would consent. So if she was taken by regular bandits, she's allowed to go back to her husband when she would get freed. Uven Netzer hasam korle melach v'hacha korle listim. But Ben Netzer, what was his status? First, we called Ben Netzer a melech, and we're also calling him a bandit. So was he a melech or was he a bandit? So the Gemara says, yes, he could be both. Gabi Achashverosh listimhu. Compared to Achashverosh, he was just a bandit. But Gabi listened to Amma Melechu. But compared to regular bandits, he's a melech. Okay, second to last line on Aleph Amid Beis. Amar uva kohenes adrin chalimedina seich. So if the husband is a kohen in the ksuva, it would be written that. Now we looked at a ksuva, and we don't write this in our ksuvas nowadays. I forgot to look up some things. I wanted to look up a certain book about stuff about ksuva, about the clauses that where a clause would be putting the ksuvas banim dichrin, the fields that would be included, the nichse malug. and I forgot to find that book and look at it. I don't have it at my house, but my father has it. But I forgot to get it. So if the husband's a Kohen, he has to redeem her, but he can't stay married to her. So he'll return her to her city. Amar Abaye, Amano Kohen Gadol Chayv Liftosa, Shani Korba, Shani Korba, Uvachones Adrich Lemdinaseh. So let's say a Kohen Gadol married a widow. We saw this in the third parak. So a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry. A regular Kohen can marry a widow, but a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. So what if the Kohen Gadol married a widow? So he's allowed to stay married to her. She violated a lav, a regular losa say with Malchus to marry her, but the marriage took effect. If you would marry someone that there's a death penalty to marry, then the marriage doesn't even take effect. So if he married someone that he was not allowed to, but it's only a lav, so it's not a death penalty case, and the marriage is able to take effect, he would be obligated to redeem his wife if she was captured. Because Shani Korba, because I consider this a case where a Kohen writes in the Kesuva that if you will be captured, I will return you to your city. However, if a Yisrael married a Mamzeres or a Nesina, so a Mamzer is Gam Dor Shishi Lo Yaval, Lo Yavalahem Lo Yavam Mamzer Bikal Hashem, that a Mamzer is never allowed to be married. So again, so it gets a little different. It's a lav. The marriage does take effect, but it's a constant. But Eino Chayv Liftos is not obligated to redeem her. She'ein ani korba v'osvinolin into. I'm not gonna, as I won't read it into the Mishnah that you will return to me to be my wife. Since she's not allowed to be his wife, he shouldn't have to redeem her because the part of the redeeming is to take her back as a wife, but they're not allowed to be married, so he doesn't have to redeem her. Whereas the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry an almana, but because when a Kohen who redeems his wife, he's not returning her. They're not going to be husband and wife anymore. He has an obligation to redeem his wife and just return her to her city because he's not redeeming her and staying married to her. That's what Abaye just said. Rava Amar, but Rava argues, Kol she'isr shvuya garim la chayv liftosa. Any case where the isser of her captivity is causing her to be prohibited to her husband, the Kohen, chayv liftosa, he has to redeem her, even though they can't stay married anymore. But isser davar acher garim la. But if there's an external prohibition which prohibits their marriage, eno chayv liftosa, he's not married, he's not obligated to redeem her. So Rava says, even though they're not going to stay married after the redemption, Rava holds that we don't read the clause as the word as clause. Because we're going to stay married, I'm going to redeem you. But that's for Yisrael. But for a Kohen, I'll return you to your city, but they can't be married. He does redeem her. Rava says no. As long as they were allowed to be married before she was held captive, then the Kohen has to redeem his wife and return her to her city. But where he wasn't allowed to marry her, but married her anyway, like this case, Amana L'Kohen Gadol, or we could also say Grusha L'Kohen Hedjot, if a regular Kohen married a Grusha, according to Rava, he doesn't have to redeem her. The only case we have to redeem her is because when she becomes forbidden to him through her being in captivity or being kidnapped. Machlokas Abaye and Rava, we always passing like Rava, except in 6 cases. This isn't one of the 6 cases. Let's say that this machlokas Abaye and Rava is like a machlokas tanaim from a Mishna or a Brisa. If a person made a vow that he was not going to have any benefit from his wife, and then she became held captive, does he have to? Excuse me, that she's not going to receive any benefit from him. So then, if he redeems her, she's receiving benefit from him. So does his obligation to redeem her nullify the vow, or does the vow stay in full effect so he's not allowed to redeem her, because then she'd be redeeming benefit from him? Rabbi Eliezer Omer Poda V'Nosen L'Ksuva. So Rabbi Eliezer says he redeems her and he has to divorce her and give her ksuva. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Nosen L'Ksuva Ve'ena Poda. Rabbi Yeshua says he has to give her the ksuva, but he does not redeem her. So if the ksuva is enough money for her to ransom herself from her captors, she can redeem herself. But he is, because of his vow, he's not in a situation where he has to redeem her. Rabbi Nassan says, "Sha'alti es sumchos ayas sumchos." Kisha Rabbi Yeshua nosan l'ksuvas ve'ina poda. When Rabbi Yeshua says that he gives her ksuva and he does not redeem her, Kishahidira l'vasof nishbis, in a case where he made a vow and later she became captured. Oh, b'nishbis l'vasof hidira. Could it be in a case where she was held captive and then he made a vow? Meaning, we saw in the Mishna that if she was already held captive, he can't divorce her and give her ksuva to avoid redeeming her. What if she was already held captive and then he took the vow? So is this case of Rabbi Yoshua similar to that, or is it not similar to that? Is that when Rabbi Yoshua says he gives her the ksuba and doesn't redeem her, is that only if the vow came first and then she became captive? Or what if she was held captive first and then he made this vow that she can't receive benefit from him? Is that analogous to the case of the Mishna where you're giving her a get? He's just trying to get out of it. But no, we say that he was required to redeem her before, so it doesn't matter that he gives her the get now. So in this particular case, it doesn't matter that he makes the vow now that she's not allowed to receive any benefit. Va'amar li, Sumchus answered me, Lo shamati, I didn't hear this halacha. V'nirin dvarim sheidir lo sof nishbes. Except it appears to me that this is a case where the vow came before the captivity. The iyamart nishbes of sof adira, because if you say that first she became captive and then he made this vow, asile rume. People are going to do fraud with it. In order to get out of redeeming their wives, they're going to say that they took the neder. So my lab matter ashes kohen kamiflagi. So isn't this machlokas between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua a case where the kohen, the man was a kohen, and he made a vow against his wife? Abaye damer Rabbi Elazar. So Abaye, who says that that the kohen still has to redeem his wife, because they're not going to be married anymore anyway. So that would be like Rabbi Eliezer, that you redeem her and then you give her the ksuva because you get divorced. But Rava Damer Rabbi Yeshua, and Rava says that you're forbidden that you don't have to redeem her. Would hold like Rabbi Yeshua. So Gemara says no. Hachamaiskin. And what's this case? This is a case where she made the vow that she doesn't want any benefit from him, and he accepted. Because remember, we learned, about a month ago, that there's laws of vow, that we were talking about when she was sent from her father's house with the agents of the husband. So who has the right, if her new husband will now have the right to nullify her vows, then she's at least considered married in regard to that. So it's considered partial marriage. So this is a case where she made the vow and he didn't veto it. Her husband didn't veto it. So Rabbi Eliezer holds, who knows in etzba ben shinaha, he stuck his own, he puts her finger between her teeth and and is getting bitten. And meaning he could have vetoed the neder. Because he didn't, now he's the one who caused the impediment for her to be redeemed, so he still has to redeem her. Rabbi Yeshua Savar, and Rabbi Yeshua says, he nasna etzba ben shina. No, because she was the one who made the vow in the first place. It's true he could have vetoed it, but if she wouldn't have made the neder in the first place, he wouldn't have had to be in a situation to either veto it or not veto it. So she put herself in this situation. So he doesn't have to ransom her. So the Gemara is going to discuss this more, but we're going to leave it here. About this machlokas Abaye and Rava, if it's like the machlokas Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer or not. But we'll leave it here for today. And